Since I was a young child, I sought after the truth of things. I had an insatiable curiosity. I wanted to know how everything worked. My 60 years of searching for truth and knowledge has taught me two things. First, almost everything you know and almost everything you've been taught are lies. No relation to truth or reality at all. The second truth is that people love bullshit. And the world of martial arts is no exception. There is so much bullshit in the world of martial arts, I feel embarrassed to tell people I'm a kung fu teacher. This is a terrible shame since martial arts training is one of the most powerful and life-enhancing practices one can study. But like so many facets of our society, bullshit has poisoned what could be an empowering and healing practice into mostly garbage. One of the hands-down biggest bullshit stories ever told is in the movie Bloodsport. I know because I was there, and I watched the real American fighter that won the World Heavyweight Full Contact Kumite Championship. And even that was bullshit, as I will explain. The year was 1986. I was studying in Hong Kong under one of the greatest Chinese kung fu masters, Chan Hon Chong. Master Chan was something of a local celebrity. He had been acting in kung fu movies since the 1930s and was the heir to the Lam Sai Wing and Wong Fei Hong schools, two of China's most famous masters. If you watch any Hong Kong kung fu movie like Once Upon a Time in China, those movies are based on Master Chan's teachers. As a local celebrity, Master Chan was invited to numerous functions, and as his students, we were invited to attend as well. At least twice a week, Master Chan would tell us to meet in front of the Guan at 7 p.m., where we would catch a taxi to some function or another. Master Chan always paid for everything. The taxis, the dinners. Admissions were always free for him and us students. Everywhere we went, Master Chan was treated as a VIP guest, and as his students, so were we. We would be given red VIP ribbons. This is a picture of me and Master Chan attending a Cantonese poetry reading. Then, one Saturday morning, we were invited to accompany Master Chan to a tournament that would later be the inspiration for the movie Bloodsport. My kung fu brother and I were really excited to see the creme de la creme of Hong Kong kung fu practitioners fighting full contact. Before I describe what happened, let me backtrack and establish that the pathological liar and con artist Frank Dux and his story that was the basis for the movie Bloodsport was, of course, total bullshit. Nothing in the movie resembled any reality, but there is a slight kernel of truth. There was an annual martial arts tournament held in Kowloon that included full contact sparring. Part of the myth comes from the fact that, at that time, full contact sparring was illegal in North America. This gave all us martial arts students the impression that full contact sparring was so dangerous that it was against the law. The implication was that black belts fighting full contact would result in a high body count. The media encouraged this line of thinking. A few years later, I attended another full contact tournament in Taipei. Two fighters, both Americans, received a couple of injuries, a bloody nose, and a cut above the eye of the other fighter. These were minor injuries and quite common in martial arts. Now, facial injuries bleed more than injuries anywhere else on the body, and combined with the sweat pouring off their faces after an intense sparring match, it looked like a lot of blood. Inside Kung Fu magazine, a magazine that published several of my articles, was there to cover the event, and they took photos of the two injured fighters with blood flowing down their faces and soaking into their white karate gis. The headline for the story was, "Bloodbath in Taipei." Now, for me, getting a bleeding nose in a sparring match does not equal a bloodbath, but media always amplifies bullshit. Add to this the one punch, one kill nonsense, and the old, "my hands are registered with the police as lethal weapons" bullshit that a lot of instructors pushed in those days, and the whole full contact sparring tournament became associated with extreme danger. The first difference between the movie and the real event is that the tournament was held at the Kowloon Sports Arena, a huge modern sports arena, not like the smoky underground cockfighting ring portrayed in the movie. Here's a picture of Master Chan, and I forget his name, but he was a famous gold dragon master officiating at the tournament. The tournament was structured like most tournaments you have been to. The morning was devoted to forms, or kata, competitions. This was a real treat, and we were blown away by the magnificent forms we saw. Praying mantis, white crane, choile foot, and a dozen more styles. And then the weapons, sword, staff, and spear, followed by exotic weapons like rope dart, hook swords, and three-section staff. I was very impressed with the beauty and precision of these forms. Then there was a lunch break, after which would be the sparring matches. Now, what I will relate next will piss a lot of people off. I can only say that this is what I witnessed, and I am recalling the events to the best of my abilities. I should mention that this was not bare-knuckle fighting. Every fighter had headgear, mouth protector, padded gloves, shin protectors, and those taekwondo chest protectors with the circles on them. The sparring matches were divided into three 3-minute rounds. The first big disappointment came when we saw that every fighter adopted a kickboxing style of fighting. I recognized some of the fighters from the forms competition earlier. There was the guy with the green sash of the praying mantis style that was so impressive in the forms competition. And now he was hopping around like some taekwondo asshole. So both fighters were hopping around on both feet, occasionally launching a front snap kick from 10 feet away. Whenever one fighter moved forwards a couple of feet, the other fighter would move back. Half the time they would just chase each other outside the ring, and the referee had to stop the fight and bring them back into the ring. This would go on for the first 2 rounds, and the referees would get frustrated and tell the fighters they had to actually fight, instead of running out of the ring. But to no avail. Half of the matches ended in a draw, even though no fighter had actually made contact. The winners were anyone that made even slight contact with his opponent. You see, faced with the very real possibility of someone kicking you full force in your face is a lot different than the tag style of sparring that was the standard in U.S. tournaments. These guys weren't really interested in having their teeth kicked out, and so they took no chances. This is a topic I will cover in future talks, but suffice to say, there is a big difference between your fantasy of martial arts and the reality of actually fighting. It's the same difference between the romantic notion of joining the military and the harsh reality of war. Dale and I couldn't believe how lame the fighting was. Then there seemed to be some excitement for the next match, and we found out there was one American Guaylo entering the arena for the heavyweight division. I don't know who he was. Was it Frank Dux? I doubt it. Like most tournaments, the fighting matches were arranged according to weight category, and the only other fighter in the whole tournament that was in the heavyweight division was this chubby Chinese kid. He looked like he was 17 years old. You could see he was scared. It was also obvious that he didn't have a lot of training, but because he was a heavyweight, he was slated to spar the American. They faced off, and as soon as the referee dropped his arm to start the fight, the American guy burst into action and executed a sliding side kick, catching the Chinese kid in his left ribs. The Chinese kid drops to the ground holding his ribs and crying out in pain. Now, I had fought a lot of people by then, and I had watched even more fighting matches. I could tell that the Chinese kid wasn't really injured. He took a dive to get out of doing any more fighting. I don't blame him. He would save face by pretending he was too injured to continue the match, and he would get out of facing any real injuries if he had continued. The American was declared the winner. The entire fight lasted less than 2 seconds. Somewhere in a strip mall in America, there is a karate dojo with a shelf full of trophies, and prominently featured will be a trophy that reads, World Champion, Full Contact, Heavyweight Division, Hong Kong. And it would be true. Never mind that I have trained 12-year-old girls that could have taken poor Porky out just as fast. And so this is just a small sample of the bullshit that surrounds martial arts. Now, I already know that the trolls will insist I never saw the real underground Bloodsport tournament, but they would be wrong. My time spent studying under Master Chan in Hong Kong was an experience that will never be repeated again. There was a constant stream of visitors to his guan, kung fu movie stars, associated grandmasters that would honor me by teaching me a technique or two, students of Master Chan that had gone on to found their own schools, and former students from all over the world would visit and pay their respects. I even worked as an extra on a couple of kung fu action movies at the old Shaw Brothers studios in the New Territories. I was tapped into the Hong Kong martial arts scene, and if there was even a hint of an underground tournament, I would have heard about it. If you don't believe me, just ask Cynthia Rothrock, who was in Hong Kong at the same time filming Chopsaki movies. Here's a picture of me and Cynthia at a private banquet in L.A. So that's the true story of Bloodsport. Just your average martial arts tournament held in a sports arena. But because full contact was allowed, it gained a reputation it didn't deserve. In my 45 years in the martial arts, I have traveled the world and visited dozens of schools and teachers and learned a half-dozen styles. I would say that fully 70% of the masters and styles were total bullshit. And as I said earlier, this is a terrible shame because martial arts is one of the most noble and spiritually advanced paths one could hope to follow. What kept me grounded was that I read the ancient writings, such as Miyamoto Musashi, Yagyu Mananori, Takuan Soho, and of course Sun Tzu. These guys would be spinning in their graves to see the noble path of a warrior reduced to a bunch of clowns dressed in silly costumes playing tag for a plastic trophy. I also read more contemporary writers such as Robert W. Smith, Eugene Herrigel, Bruce Lee, and my departed friend and writing partner, Joe Hyams, who wrote the book Zen in the Martial Arts. Joe was also a student of Bruce Lee. However, just because I advocate a philosophical approach doesn't mean I am one of those armchair quarterback types that like to dress in a skirt and LARP at martial arts. Since the first day I started teaching, I insisted students spar every class, full contact, no rules. This was long before the mixed martial arts, and in all those years, not one student was ever seriously injured. Yes, people got a bloody nose, or a black eye, or a fat lip, even a broken finger or toe. But these injuries were minor, and while they would hurt for a couple of days, the lesson that bloody nose taught you lasted a lifetime. Martial arts is a noble spiritual path, one in which the more times you got punched in the head, the more enlightened you became. And like all spiritual paths, one of the first prerequisites is to suppress and control your own ego. It is only by suppressing your ego that you are able to tap into the universal frequency, or to reference pop culture, the Force. I once attended an underground Muay Thai competition in the jungles of Thailand. This tournament actually did look like the movie Bloodsport. It was a bamboo-constructed boxing ring surrounded by bamboo bleachers, literally hidden in the jungle and lit with torches and roughly wired fluorescent lights run from portable generators. We had to walk for almost an hour in the pitch dark through a jungle trail to reach it. Gambling was the main attraction, as dozens of Thai men wagered on each match, like you would see at a cockfight. One fighter has always stuck in my memory. Every time he took a roundhouse kick to the ribs or a punch to the head, he would smile and bow his head in gratitude to his opponent. This guy was a warrior. He thanked his opponent for pointing out a weakness in his defense. Compare this to your average martial artist today who will fly into a rage if they receive the slightest scratch. And that's a Gurdjieff reference for those that know. Of course, this humble and grateful fighter won. Well, it seems I've gone off into quite the tangent. By now I'm sure I have seriously pissed off 90% of all martial artists. And if you're still listening and not already typing a bunch of F-bombs in the comments section, then you would like my book, A Master's Guide to the Way of the Warrior. Guaranteed 100% bullshit free. Thanks for listening.